I promise to pay for this milk when I grow up." The desperate plea of a 7-year-old girl echoed through Hartford's largest grocery store, her small voice trembling with determination and fear. Rachel Stanley stood before the towering dairy section, clutching a crumpled $5 bill in her tiny fist, her bright blue eyes brimming with unshed tears. The fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows across the polished floors, while the hum of refrigerators mixed with the uncomfortable murmur of shoppers pretending not to witness this heartbreaking scene. The little girl shivered in her carefully mended pink dress, but stood straighter, showing a resilience that would break any heart watching. From across the aisle, Michael Dalton froze mid-step. The 32-year-old millionaire CEO felt something crack deep within his chest, a place that had been dead for 3 years since losing his wife and daughter. Something about her innocent desperation awakened feelings he thought were buried forever. Then the unexpected happened. This powerful man found himself walking toward a little girl whose world was collapsing over the price of a gallon of milk. As he approached, he noticed something that made his breath catch. A small star-shaped birthmark on her arm, identical to one he remembered from years past. The store fell silent. Customers stopped to watch as Hartford's most feared businessman knelt down to a child's eye level. Whispers began to circulate, and even the stern manager stepped back in surprise. This wasn't just about a wealthy man helping a poor child. This was about second chances, about promises that connect hearts across impossible odds. As Michael stared at that familiar birthmark and into those blue eyes that reminded him of someone he once loved, one question would change everything. Could this little girl possibly be his daughter? Or is it just a coincidence of fate? The rain drummed against the windows of Hartford's largest grocery store as Michael Dalton pushed his cart through the aisles with mechanical precision. His expensive Italian leather shoes clicked against the polished floor, each step echoing the emptiness that had consumed his life for the past 3 years. At 32, Michael had everything money could buy: a penthouse overlooking the Connecticut River, a fleet of luxury cars, and a financial empire that made him one of Hartford's most feared and respected businessmen. Yet behind his cold gray eyes lay a void that no amount of success could fill. The fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows across his angular face as he grabbed items from his meticulously planned shopping list. Organic salmon, imported wine, artisanal bread, all the finest things that would sit untouched in his refrigerator, just like every week. Michael had lost the ability to taste, to feel, to truly live after that devastating night when his world crumbled in a sterile hospital room. He was reaching for a bottle of vintage scotch when a small, trembling voice pierced through the ambient noise of the store. "Please, sir, I promise I'll pay you back when I grow up. My mama really needs this milk." Michael's hand froze mid-reach. Something about that innocent, desperate plea struck a chord deep within his chest, a place he thought had died along with his dreams of fatherhood. Slowly, he turned toward the dairy section, his heart beginning to race for the first time in years. There, standing before the towering refrigerated cases filled with milk cartons, was a little girl who couldn't have been more than 7 years old. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, slightly messy from what appeared to be a long day. She wore a faded pink dress that had been carefully mended at the seams, clean white sneakers that had seen better days, and clutched a crumpled $5 bill in her small fist. Her bright blue eyes that reminded Michael painfully of someone from his past, were filled with unshed tears as she looked up at the stern-faced store manager. "Listen, little girl," the manager said, his voice growing impatient as other customers began to stare. "I've told you 3 times already. $5 isn't enough for a gallon of milk, tax included. Either you get the money or you leave. I can't run a charity here." Rachel Stanley, though Michael didn't know her name yet, bit her lower lip, a habit she'd inherited from her mother. "But Mr. Peterson, my mama is working late again, and we don't have any milk for my cereal tomorrow morning. She always says breakfast is the most important meal of the day, and I have a big spelling test." Her voice wavered slightly, but she stood straighter, showing a resilience that broke Michael's heart. "I promise, cross my heart and hope to die, that I'll pay you back every penny when I get big and have a job like my mama." The manager, a middle-aged man with graying temples and wire-rimmed glasses, shook his head firmly. That's not how business works, sweetheart. Money now, goods now, no money, no goods. I'm going to have to ask you to leave if you can't pay. Michael watched this exchange unfold, and something extraordinary happened. For the first time since Elizabeth and Bethany died, he felt genuine emotion flooding through his chest. The little girl's determination, her innocence, her unwavering belief that a promise meant something in this cold world, reminded him of the father he had dreamed of becoming. In that moment, the carefully constructed walls around his heart began to crack. Without hesitation, Michael stepped forward, his presence immediately commanding attention. His 6-foot frame towered over the scene, and his expensive charcoal suit marked him as someone of importance. "Excuse me," he said, his voice carrying the authority of a man accustomed to being heard. "I'll cover whatever she needs." The manager's demeanor shifted instantly upon recognizing one of the store's most valuable customers. "Oh, Mr. Dalton. Of course, sir. Right away, sir." Rachel looked up at Michael with wide, curious eyes that sparkled with unshed tears of relief. Up close, Michael could see the faint freckles scattered across her button nose, the way her small hands trembled slightly from either cold or nervousness, and most surprisingly, a small star-shaped birthmark on her upper arm that was visible through a small tear in her sleeve. That birthmark hit Michael like a physical blow. His breath caught in his throat as memories he had buried deep came flooding back. Memories of another blonde woman with the same unusual mark. Memories of love and loss, of misunderstandings that had torn his world apart, long before tragedy struck again. "Thank you, mister," Rachel said softly, her voice filled with genuine gratitude. "I promise I'll pay you back someday. My mama always says we should pay our debts." Michael knelt down to her eye level, something he never thought he'd do in his expensive suit in the middle of a public place. This close, he could smell the faint scent of children's shampoo in her hair and see the wisdom in her young eyes that spoke of a childhood touched too early by adult responsibilities. "What's your name, sweetheart?" he asked, his voice gentler than it had been in years. "Rachel Stanley," she replied, extending her small hand in a gesture that was both childish and remarkably mature. "My mama taught me to always introduce myself properly to new friends." "Well, Rachel Stanley, it's very nice to meet you. I'm Michael." He shook her tiny hand with the same seriousness he'd give a business partner. "And you don't need to pay me back. Sometimes grown-ups help each other out, and that's okay." Rachel's eyes lit up with wonder. "Really? Just like that? But Mama always says nothing in life is free." "Your mama sounds very wise," Michael replied, standing up and pushing his cart closer. "But sometimes, when someone reminds us of what's really important in life, helping them is actually a gift to ourselves." As they walked through the store together, Rachel chattering beside him with the fearless openness that only children possess, Michael found himself actually listening to another human being for the first time in years. She told him about her school, about her favorite teacher, Mrs. Henderson, who smelled like vanilla cookies, about how she was learning to read chapter books all by herself. "My mama works real hard," Rachel explained, as they stopped in the cereal aisle. "She cleans offices during the day and then she goes to school at night. She's learning about numbers and money stuff. Finance, I think she calls it. She says someday she's going to have a job where she wears pretty dresses and helps people with their money problems." Michael's chest tightened. Finance. The coincidences were piling up in a way that made his rational mind reel. "That sounds like your mama has big dreams." "Oh, she does." Rachel nodded enthusiastically, reaching for a box of generic cereal on the bottom shelf. "She says dreams are the only things that nobody can take away from you, no matter how poor you are. But sometimes I think she's too tired to dream. She falls asleep at her book sometimes and I have to wake her up so she doesn't get a crick in her neck." As Michael added items to his cart, items he found himself selecting based on what a growing child might need rather than his usual gourmet preferences, Rachel continued her innocent chatter. She told him about Mrs. Patterson, the elderly neighbor who watched her after school while her mother worked and studied. "Mrs. Patterson makes the best chocolate chip cookies, but don't tell Mama I said that," Rachel whispered conspiratorially. "Mama tries real hard with cooking, but she burns everything when she's thinking about her homework." Michael found himself smiling, actually smiling, for the first time since the accident. "Your secret's safe with me." They were approaching the checkout when Rachel suddenly stopped, tugging gently on Michael's sleeve. "Mr. Michael, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Are you sad? You have kind eyes, but they look like they've been crying for a long time, even if there aren't any tears." The question hit Michael like a physical blow. Children, he remembered, had an uncanny ability to see past the masks adults wore. He looked down at this remarkable little girl who had somehow seen through his carefully constructed facade in the space of 30 minutes. "I was sad, Rachel, for a very long time, but talking to you today has made me feel a little less sad." Rachel nodded solemnly, as if this made perfect sense to her 7-year-old mind. "Mama says sadness is like a heavy backpack. You can carry it, but sometimes you need help taking it off for a while." At the checkout, Michael not only paid for the milk, but added groceries he thought a struggling family might need: fresh fruits, vegetables, chicken, rice, pasta, and even some treats he suspected Rachel rarely got to enjoy. When the cashier rang up the total, Michael noticed Rachel's eyes widen at the amount. "That's more money than Mama makes in a whole week," she whispered in awe. As they walked toward the exit, Michael realized he wasn't ready for this encounter to end. This little girl had awakened something in him that he thought was dead forever: hope, compassion, the desire to protect and nurture. But more than that, the nagging resemblance to someone from his past was eating at him. "Rachel," he said as they stood outside the store, rain still falling steadily, "where do you live? I'd like to make sure you get home safely with all these groceries." Rachel pointed down the street toward a cluster of modest apartment buildings. "Just down on Elm Street, apartment 2B. It's not fancy like some places, but Mama makes it feel like home." Elm Street. Michael knew the area. Lower income housing, but clean and safe. The kind of place where hard-working families did their best to build decent lives despite financial struggles. "Would it be okay if I drove you home? It's raining pretty hard." Rachel considered this with the seriousness of someone much older than her years. "Mama always says not to go with strangers, but you bought milk for me, so I think that makes you a friend. And friends help friends, right?" Michael's Tesla was parked in the VIP section, and Rachel's eyes went wide as saucers when she saw it. "Is this your car? It looks like something from a movie." As Michael helped her into the passenger seat and loaded the groceries, he found himself seeing his wealth through new eyes. All these material possessions that had once seemed so important now felt hollow compared to the simple joy radiating from this child over a gallon of milk and some fresh strawberries. The drive to Elm Street was short, but filled with Rachel's constant chatter about everything she saw out the window. She pointed out her school, the library where she and her mother sometimes went on weekends, the park where she played when Mrs. Patterson took her outside. When they pulled up to her apartment building, a well-maintained but clearly older structure, Rachel turned to Michael with shining eyes. "Thank you so much, Mr. Michael. You're like an angel, just like in the stories Mama reads to me." As Michael helped carry the groceries up 2 flights of stairs to apartment 2B, his heart was pounding with an emotion he couldn't quite name: anticipation, fear, hope. When Rachel knocked on the door calling out, "Mama, I'm home," he felt as though he was standing on the precipice of something that would change his life forever. The door opened, and Michael Dalton's world tilted on its axis. Standing in the doorway was Jennifer Stanley, older, more tired than he remembered, but unmistakably the woman who had once been the love of his life. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and she wore scrubs that indicated she was probably between her day job and evening classes. But those eyes, those same brilliant blue eyes that had haunted his dreams for years, went wide with shock and recognition. "Michael?" Her voice was barely a whisper, filled with disbelief and something that might have been pain. "Hello, Jennifer." His own voice sounded foreign to his ears, thick with emotion he thought he'd forgotten how to feel. Rachel looked between the 2 adults, sensing the sudden tension but not understanding it. "Mama, this is Mr. Michael. He's the angel I told you about who bought our milk and all these groceries." Jennifer's gaze dropped to the bags of groceries, then back to Michael's face, her expression cycling through confusion, recognition, and something that looked almost like fear. Rachel, sweetheart, why don't you go put your backpack in your room while Michael and I talk for a minute? As Rachel skipped down the hallway, chattering to herself about her spelling test tomorrow, Jennifer and Michael stood in her doorway, 8 years of separation hanging between them like a chasm. The small apartment behind her was clean but sparse, furnished with obvious hand-me-downs and decorations that spoke of a mother trying to make a cheerful home on an impossibly tight budget. "What are you doing here, Michael?" Jennifer's voice was carefully controlled, but he could hear the tremor beneath the surface. "I was shopping. I met Rachel. She needed milk." The words felt inadequate, unable to capture the emotional earthquake that had just occurred in his life. Jennifer's eyes filled with tears she was clearly fighting not to shed. "You can't be here. You can't just appear like this. Not now. Jennifer, we need to talk." "No." She shook her head firmly, though her voice broke slightly. "We said everything we needed to say 8 years ago. You made your choice, and I made mine." But even as she spoke, Michael's eyes were drawn to her arm, where he could see the edge of a familiar star-shaped birthmark peeking out from beneath her scrub sleeve. The same mark he'd just seen on Rachel's arm. The same mark that had once been his favorite thing to trace with his fingertip during lazy Sunday mornings when they'd dreamed about their future together. "Jennifer," he said quietly, his voice filled with a dawning realization that terrified and exhilarated him in equal measure. "We really need to talk." But before she could respond, Rachel came bouncing back down the hallway, completely oblivious to the adult drama unfolding around her. "Mr. Michael, do you want to see my room? I have a collection of pretty rocks, and Mama helped me make a chart of all the different kinds." The innocence in her voice, the way she looked at him with such trust and affection, nearly brought Michael to his knees. Looking at her now, knowing what he suspected, he could see himself in the shape of her nose, the way she tilted her head when she was thinking, even the way she gestured with her hands when she got excited. "Rachel," Jennifer said quickly, her voice strained. "Mr. Michael probably has to go now. He's a very busy man." But Rachel had already taken Michael's hand, her small fingers wrapping around his with complete trust. "Please? Just for a minute? I promise I'll be good." Michael looked at Jennifer, seeing the panic in her eyes, the way she was gripping the doorframe as if it was the only thing keeping her upright. He knew he should leave, knew he was disrupting whatever life she'd built for herself and Rachel. But he also knew, with a certainty that shook him to his core, that everything had just changed. "Maybe just for a minute," he said softly, his eyes never leaving Jennifer's face. Rachel's room was small but filled with love. The walls were decorated with her artwork and school projects, and her bookshelf was packed with library books and a few well-worn favorites. She showed Michael her rock collection with the enthusiasm of a professor giving a lecture, explaining the differences between quartz and granite with surprising accuracy for a 7-year-old. "This one's my favorite," she said, holding up a smooth piece of rose quartz. "Mama found it for me at the river last summer. She says it's the color of love." As Rachel chattered on about her rocks, her books, her plans for when she grew up, Michael found himself studying her face, looking for traces of himself and finding them everywhere. The way she wrinkled her nose when she was concentrating, the way she bit her lower lip when she was thinking hard about something, the way her eyes lit up when she was excited about sharing something she loved. "I'm going to be just like Mama when I grow up," Rachel announced, carefully putting her rocks back in their designated spots. "I'm going to help people with their money so they don't have to worry about buying milk." "That sounds like a wonderful plan," Michael managed, his throat tight with emotion. When they returned to the living room, Jennifer was standing by the window, her arms wrapped around herself as if she was trying to hold herself together. She turned when she heard them coming, and Michael could see she'd been crying. "Rachel, sweetie, it's time for Mr. Michael to go. You need to get ready for bed, and I have homework to do." Rachel's face fell slightly, but she nodded obediently. "Okay, Mama. Mr. Michael, thank you again for the milk and everything. You really are an angel." She threw her arms around Michael's waist in a quick hug that nearly undid him completely. For a moment, he allowed himself to hold her, to breathe in the scent of her hair, to feel what it might have been like to tuck his own daughter into bed every night. Good night, Rachel. Sweet dreams. As Rachel headed toward the bathroom to brush her teeth, Jennifer walked Michael to the door. They stood there for a moment, the weight of everything unsaid hanging between them. That birthmark, Michael said quietly, so Rachel couldn't hear from the bathroom. She has your birthmark. Jennifer's face went pale. Michael, don't. How old is she, Jennifer? Please don't do this. How old is she? Jennifer's voice was barely a whisper. She's 7. Michael's mind raced through the timeline. 8 years since their breakup. 7-year-old Rachel. The math was simple, but the implications were staggering. Is she mine? The question hung in the air between them like a bomb waiting to explode. Jennifer's tears were flowing freely now. You left, Michael. You chose your career over us. Over me. That's not how it happened, and you know it. I got that job offer in Boston, and you said you wouldn't come with me. You said if I left, we were done. Because you never asked me to marry you. You never said you wanted a future with me. And then suddenly you're ready to move to another state for a job, and I was supposed to just follow you like some lovesick puppy? I was 24 years old, Jennifer. I was trying to build something to become someone worthy of you. I never needed you to be worthy of me, Michael. I just needed you to want me enough to fight for us. The pain in her voice was raw, honest, and it cut through Michael like a blade. They stared at each other across the hallway, two people who had loved each other completely and lost each other through pride and miscommunication and the cruel timing of youth. Is she mine? He asked again, his voice breaking. Jennifer closed her eyes, tears streaming down her face. I found out I was pregnant 2 weeks after you left. I was going to call you, but then I heard you were already seeing someone else in Boston. I was never seeing anyone else. There's never been anyone else, Jennifer. Not really. It doesn't matter now. She thinks her father is Noah Thompson. He was good to us for a while until he got transferred to Seattle for work. She has memories of him, birthday parties, bedtime stories. I can't take that away from her. But even as she spoke, Michael could see the exhaustion in her eyes, the weight of carrying this secret alone for 7 years. You've been doing this all by yourself. I'm fine. We're fine. We don't need anything from you, Michael. We don't need you disrupting our lives. Our lives? The words came out sharper than he intended. She's my daughter too, isn't she? Keep your voice down, Jennifer hissed, glancing toward the bathroom where they could hear Rachel singing to herself as she brushed her teeth. Michael ran his hands through his hair, trying to process everything that was happening. An hour ago, he'd been a hollow shell of a man going through the motions of living. Now, he was standing in his ex-girlfriend's hallway, discovering he had a daughter he never knew existed. I want a paternity test, he said quietly. Jennifer's face crumpled. Michael, please don't do this to her. She's happy. She's innocent. She doesn't need her world turned upside down. And what about my world? What about the 7 years of her life I've already missed? Before Jennifer could answer, Rachel came skipping out of the bathroom in her pajamas, her face scrubbed clean and her hair brushed. Mama, I'm ready for story time. Both adults quickly wiped their eyes and tried to compose themselves as Rachel looked between them with curiosity. Is everything okay? You both look sad again. Jennifer knelt down and pulled Rachel into a hug. Everything's fine, baby girl. Mr. Michael was just leaving. Rachel looked up at Michael with those brilliant blue eyes that were so much like her mother's, but now he could see they had flecks of gray in them, just like his own. Will I see you again, Mr. Michael? The question hung in the air, loaded with possibility and pain and hope and fear all at once. Michael looked at Jennifer over Rachel's head, seeing the plea in her eyes not to make promises he couldn't keep, not to hurt this innocent child who had already learned too young that life could be unpredictable. I hope so, Rachel. I really hope so. As Michael walked back to his car, his mind was spinning with everything that had just happened. He sat in the driver's seat for several minutes, staring up at the lighted window of apartment 2B, trying to process the fact that somewhere in that modest home was a little girl who might be his daughter, a daughter he'd never known existed, a daughter who was growing up without ever knowing her real father. The drive back to his penthouse passed in a blur of city lights and racing thoughts. His luxurious apartment, which had once been his sanctuary, now felt empty and meaningless. He poured himself 3 fingers of scotch and stood at his floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out over the Hartford skyline and thinking about a 7-year-old girl who promised to pay for milk when she grew up. Over the next few days, Michael found himself driving past Rachel's school at dismissal time, watching from a distance as she walked with other children to meet Mrs. Patterson at the corner. He found himself learning her routine: school at 8, picked up by Mrs. Patterson at 3:30, afternoons at the elderly woman's apartment until Jennifer came to collect her around 6:30. He began leaving anonymous gifts, fresh groceries appearing on their doorstep, a scholarship mysteriously becoming available for Jennifer's night classes, Rachel's school lunch account being paid up for months in advance. He told himself he was just helping a struggling family, but deep down he knew he was trying to be part of their lives in the only way he could without disrupting everything. It was on a Friday afternoon, exactly 2 weeks after their first meeting, that Michael's carefully maintained distance crumbled completely. He was leaving his office building when he spotted Jennifer across the street, coming out of the community college where she took her evening classes. She looked exhausted, carrying a heavy backpack and multiple textbooks, her scrubs wrinkled from a long day of work before school. Without thinking, Michael found himself crossing the street, drawn by an invisible force he couldn't resist. "Jennifer." She turned, startled, and for a moment her guard dropped completely. She looked vulnerable, tired, younger than her 30 years. "Michael, what are you doing here?" "I could ask you the same thing. This is downtown Hartford. You live on Elm Street. I take classes here, business administration with a focus on finance." Her voice was cautious, as if she wasn't sure she should be telling him this. "Finance." He nodded, remembering Rachel's words about her mother learning about numbers and money stuff. They stood there on the sidewalk as evening pedestrians flowed around them, 2 people trying to navigate the impossible space between their past and their present. "How is she?" Michael asked quietly. "She's fine. She asks about you sometimes. The angel who bought her milk." "And what do you tell her?" "I tell her that sometimes angels come into our lives for just a moment, to help us when we need it most, and then they go back to heaven to help other people." The words stung, but Michael understood the kindness in them, the way Jennifer was trying to explain his absence without making Rachel feel abandoned. "I've been thinking about what you said, about the paternity test." Jennifer's face went pale. "Michael, I'll pay for it. It can be done discreetly. She doesn't have to know what it's for." "And then what? When you find out she's yours, then what happens?" "I don't know," Michael admitted. "But I can't pretend I never met her. I can't pretend she doesn't exist. If she's my daughter, she'll break your heart," Jennifer said quietly. "She'll ask you for things you can't give her. Not money. She's not like that. But time, attention, consistency. She'll want you to come to her school plays and help with her homework and be there when she has nightmares. Are you prepared for that, Michael? Are you prepared to be a father, not just a wealthy man who pays for things?" The question hit Michael like a physical blow because it forced him to examine what kind of man he'd become. For years, he'd hidden behind his wealth and his business success, using them as shields against real human connection. But Rachel had seen through all of that in a matter of minutes. "I want to try," he said finally. "I want to learn how to be the man she deserves to have as a father." Jennifer studied his face for a long moment, searching for something. "You've changed. From the man I knew 8 years ago. I lost my wife and daughter 3 years ago. Childbirth complications. I've been dead inside ever since until I met Rachel." Jennifer's expression softened with genuine sympathy. "I'm sorry. I had no idea. Her name was Elizabeth, the daughter I thought I'd never have. And now you think maybe you do have a daughter." "I know I do," Michael said with quiet conviction. "I can see it in her eyes, in the way she moves, in the things she says. She's mine, Jennifer. Ours. They were interrupted by the buzzing of Jennifer's phone. She answered quickly, her voice shifting into concerned mother mode. Mrs. Patterson, is everything okay? What do you mean she won't stop crying? I'll be right there. She hung up, worry creasing her features. Something's wrong with Rachel. She won't stop crying, and Mrs. Patterson doesn't know why. I'll drive you, Michael said immediately. Michael, you can't. I have a car. You're obviously upset. Let me help. The drive to Mrs. Patterson's apartment was tense with worry and unspoken emotions. Jennifer directed Michael through the streets, her hands twisted in her lap as she tried calling Rachel's school to see if anything had happened. Mrs. Patterson was a sweet-faced woman in her 70s who met them at the door with obvious relief. Oh, thank goodness you're here, dear. She came home from school fine, had her snack, started on her homework, and then suddenly just started sobbing. She won't tell me what's wrong. They found Rachel curled up on Mrs. Patterson's couch crying as if her heart was breaking. When she saw Jennifer, she launched herself into her mother's arms. Mama, I did something wrong. What do you mean, baby girl? What happened? Through her tears, Rachel's story came tumbling out. There was this boy at school, Tommy Martinez, and he was making fun of Amy Peterson because her lunch was just crackers and peanut butter again. He said her family was too poor to buy real food, and Amy started crying. And I got so mad, Mama, because that's not nice. And I know what it feels like when people say mean things about being poor. Jennifer's heart was breaking as she listened, but she kept her voice gentle. What did you do, sweetie? I told Tommy that poor people aren't bad people, and that Amy's mama works just as hard as anybody, and that he should be ashamed for being mean. And then I told him that my angel friend was going to buy lunch for Amy every day so she wouldn't have to eat crackers anymore. Michael's breath caught in his throat as he realized what had happened. But Mama, Rachel continued, her tears flowing harder, I don't know how to find the angel man again, and now Amy thinks she's going to get good lunches, and Tommy thinks I'm a liar, and I promised something I can't keep, just like when I promised to pay for the milk. Except this time I promised for somebody else, and what if Amy goes hungry because I'm a liar? The room fell silent except for Rachel's quiet sobbing. Jennifer held her daughter close, her own eyes filling with tears at the pure heart of this child who had tried to help a friend and was now tormented by the fear that she'd made an empty promise. Michael stepped forward slowly, and Rachel looked up at him with surprise and hope warring in her tear-stained face. Rachel, he said gently, what if I told you that angels are always listening, even when we can't see them? Really? Really? And what if I told you that when a little girl makes a promise to help a friend, that's exactly the kind of thing that makes angels want to help? Rachel's eyes widened. You mean? I mean that Amy Peterson will have the best school lunches money can buy starting Monday morning. And Tommy Martinez is going to learn that kindness is much more important than money. Rachel's face lit up like Christmas morning, and she launched herself from her mother's arms straight into Michael's. As he held her, feeling her small body shake with relief and joy, Michael made a silent promise of his own, that he would move heaven and earth to make sure this little girl never again had to worry about keeping a promise to help someone she cared about. Later that evening, after they'd returned to Jennifer's apartment and Rachel had finally settled into sleep, Jennifer and Michael sat in her tiny kitchen, drinking coffee and talking in whispers. You can't keep doing this, Jennifer said quietly. You can't keep being her guardian angel from the shadows. Why not? Because she's getting attached to you, and because you're getting attached to her, and because when this all comes crashing down, she's going to be the one who gets hurt. Michael set down his coffee cup and looked directly at Jennifer. What if it doesn't have to come crashing down? What if we could find a way to make this work? Make what work, Michael? You're a millionaire CEO. I'm a single mother working 2 jobs and going to school at night. We live in completely different worlds. But we created something beautiful together once. We created her. Jennifer's eyes filled with tears again. We don't know that for certain. Yes, we do. And deep down, so do you. They sat in silence for several minutes, both lost in their own thoughts. Finally, Jennifer spoke. If we do the test and it comes back positive, what happens then? Then we figure it out. Together. I can't lose her, Michael. She's my whole world. I'm not asking you to lose her. I'm asking you to let me love her too. The next few weeks passed in a strange sort of limbo. Michael arranged for the paternity test to be done discreetly through Rachel's pediatrician, explained to her as routine blood work during her regular checkup. Jennifer watched nervously as Michael gradually became more present in their lives, showing up at Rachel's school play, helping with homework at the kitchen table, taking both of them out for dinner at family-friendly restaurants where Rachel could order anything she wanted from the menu. To Rachel, it seemed perfectly natural that the nice man who had bought her milk was becoming their friend. She chattered to him about everything and nothing, shared her drawings and her dreams, asked him about his job and his fancy car, and whether he ever got lonely living in such a big apartment all by himself. "Don't you have any kids, Mr. Michael?" she asked one evening as he helped her with her math homework. Michael's hand stilled on the worksheet. "Not yet, sweetheart, but I hope someday I might." "You'd be a really good daddy," Rachel said with the casual certainty that only children possess. "You're nice, and you're smart, and you always remember to cut the crusts off my sandwiches the way I like them." When the test results came back, Michael called Jennifer at work and asked her to meet him at the coffee shop near her apartment. She arrived looking pale and nervous, her hands shaking slightly as she sat down across from him. "Well?" she asked, though her voice suggested she already knew the answer. Michael slid the envelope across the small table. 99.9% probability of paternity. Jennifer closed her eyes and took a shaky breath. "So it's official. She's our daughter, Jennifer, mine and yours. Now what? Now we tell her the truth." Jennifer's eyes snapped open. "Michael, she's 7 years old. How do we explain that everything she thought she knew about her family was a lie?" "We don't tell her it was a lie. We tell her it was a story that wasn't quite complete. We tell her that sometimes grown-ups make mistakes, but that doesn't mean the love isn't real." "And Noah?" "What do I tell her about Noah?" "The truth. That Noah is a good man who cared about both of you, but that her real father is someone who has been looking for her his whole life without knowing it." They decided to tell Rachel together on a Saturday morning when they could take as much time as she needed to process the news. Jennifer made pancakes, Rachel's favorite breakfast, while Michael sat at the kitchen table, his stomach in knots as he prepared for the most important conversation of his life. Rachel came bouncing into the kitchen in her pajamas, her hair sticking up at odd angles and a smile already lighting up her face at the smell of pancakes. "Good morning, Mama." "Good morning, Mr. Michael. Are we having a pancake party?" "Something like that, sweetheart," Jennifer said, her voice slightly strained. "But first, we need to have an important talk." Rachel's expression grew serious as she climbed into her chair, sensing the gravity in the room. "Am I in trouble? Did I do something wrong at school?" "No, baby girl, you're not in trouble," Michael said gently, reaching across the table to take her small hand in his. "But sometimes grown-ups need to explain things that are complicated, and we want to make sure you understand." Rachel nodded solemnly, her blue eyes moving between her mother and Michael with the wisdom of a child who had learned early to read adult emotions. Jennifer took a deep breath, her hands trembling slightly as she served the pancakes. "Rachel, do you remember when we talked about your daddy Noah and how he had to move far away for work?" "Uh-huh. You said maybe someday he might come back to visit." "Well, sweetheart, I need to tell you something about that. You see, sometimes grown-ups make mistakes, not because they want to hurt anyone, but because life gets confusing and scary." Rachel's brow furrowed with concentration. "What kind of mistakes, Mama?" Michael cleared his throat softly. "Rachel, what would you say if I told you that sometimes angels aren't just visitors who come to help and then go away? What if sometimes they're supposed to stay?" "I'd say that would be really nice," Rachel replied carefully. "But I thought angels lived in heaven." "Most of them do," Jennifer said, sitting down beside her daughter and taking her other hand. "But sometimes when people love each other very much, they create something so special that heaven sends a guardian angel to watch over it." Rachel's eyes lit up with understanding. Like how you and Daddy Noah made me? Jennifer's voice caught in her throat. Actually, sweetheart, that's the part we need to explain. Noah is a wonderful man who loved us both very much. And he was like a daddy to you when you were very little. But he's not your biological father. Your real daddy. Rachel looked confused, her small face scrunched up as she tried to process this information. Then who is my real daddy? Michael's heart was pounding so hard he was sure Rachel could hear it. Rachel, do you remember that first day we met, when you promised to pay for the milk when you grew up? Of course, that was the day my angel came. What if I told you that wasn't the first day we met? What if I told you that I've been looking for you my whole life, even though I didn't know I was looking? Rachel stared at him with wide eyes, her quick mind putting pieces together. You mean you're my real daddy? Yes, sweetheart, I'm your real daddy. The silence that followed seemed to stretch forever. Rachel looked back and forth between Jennifer and Michael, her expression cycling through confusion, wonder, and something that might have been joy. But why didn't you come find me before? Didn't you want me? The question broke Michael's heart. Oh, Rachel, I wanted you more than anything in the whole world. But I didn't know you existed. Your mama and we had a fight a long time ago before you were born, and we stopped talking to each other. She didn't get a chance to tell me about you. Were you mean to Mama? Is that why she didn't tell you? No, baby, Jennifer interjected quickly. Daddy wasn't mean to me. We were both young and scared and we made mistakes. I should have told him about you, but I was afraid. Afraid of what? Afraid that he might not want us. Afraid that we weren't good enough for him. Rachel processed this with the startling clarity that children sometimes possess. But that's silly, Mama. We're wonderful. Daddy would have to be crazy not to want us. Despite the emotional weight of the moment, both adults found themselves smiling at Rachel's matter-of-fact assessment. You're absolutely right, Michael said. I would have to be crazy not to want you. Both of you. Rachel was quiet for several minutes, methodically eating her pancakes while her 7-year-old mind worked through this life-changing information. Finally, she looked up at Michael with those brilliant blue eyes that were so much like her mother's. So if you're my real daddy, does that mean you're going to stay this time? You're not going to go away like Noah did? The question hung in the air like a challenge, a test, a plea all rolled into one. Michael felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. Not just the financial responsibility he could easily handle, but the emotional responsibility of being the father this remarkable child deserved. I'm not going anywhere, Rachel. Not ever again. If you'll have me, I want to be your daddy every single day for the rest of your life. Rachel slid down from her chair and walked around the table to where Michael sat. She climbed into his lap with the fearless trust that only children possess, wrapping her small arms around his neck. I think I'd like that very much, Daddy. The word daddy spoken in her sweet voice nearly undid Michael completely. He held her close, breathing in the scent of her hair, feeling her small heart beating against his chest, and for the first time since Elizabeth and Bethany died, he felt truly, completely alive. Over the next few months, their lives transformed in ways none of them had imagined possible. Michael's penthouse apartment suddenly felt too cold, too sterile for a family, so he began looking for a house, something with a yard where Rachel could play, a kitchen where they could all cook together, bedrooms close enough that he could hear if she had nightmares. Jennifer struggled with the changes at first. She was fiercely independent, and accepting help, even from Michael, felt like admitting defeat. But gradually, she began to see that this wasn't about her pride or her ability to provide for Rachel alone. This was about giving their daughter the family she deserved. I want to marry you, Michael said one evening as they sat on Jennifer's small balcony, watching Rachel play in the courtyard below with some neighbor children. Not because of Rachel, not because we have a history, but because somewhere in the past few months I've fallen in love with the woman you've become. Jennifer was quiet for a long time, watching their daughter's joyful play. I'm not the same person I was 8 years ago, Michael. I'm harder now, more cautious. I've had to be. I know. And I'm not the same person either. We're both scarred, both different from who we were when we were kids. But maybe that's not a bad thing. Maybe we needed to become these people, the people we are now, to be able to do this right. And what if we mess it up again? What if we hurt Rachel? Then we'll fix it, together. But I can't live the rest of my life wondering, what if? Can you? Jennifer turned to look at him, really look at him, and she saw not the ambitious young man who had left her 8 years ago, but a mature man who had learned that success meant nothing without people to share it with. A man who read bedtime stories with different voices for each character, who had learned to braid hair from YouTube videos, who never missed a single school event or doctor's appointment. Ask me again in a year, she said finally, when we've had time to see if this is real or just the novelty of being a family. Michael smiled, understanding her caution and respecting her need for time. I'll ask you again in a year. As autumn turned to winter, their routine became comfortable, natural. Michael had found a beautiful colonial house in West Hartford, with a big backyard and excellent schools. Jennifer had finished her degree with honors and, at Michael's encouragement, had started working at his company, not as a favor to the boss's girlfriend, but because her fresh perspective and genuine understanding of financial hardship brought a humanity to their business practices that had been missing. I have an idea, Jennifer said one December evening as they decorated their first Christmas tree as a family. Rachel was carefully hanging ornaments on the lower branches, chattering about what she hoped Santa would bring, while Michael tried to untangle a particularly stubborn string of lights. What's that? Michael asked, looking up from his battle with the Christmas lights. I've been thinking about what you said, about bringing more humanity to the business. What if we started a foundation? Something to help families like I used to be. Single parents trying to get an education. Kids who need help with basic necessities. Michael stopped what he was doing, struck by the simple brilliance of the idea. A foundation that helps people become self-sufficient, not just hands out money. Exactly. Job training, educational scholarships, childcare assistance while parents are in school. The kind of help that gives people hope, not just temporary relief. Rachel looked up from her ornament hanging, her face bright with excitement. Could we help kids who don't have enough money for lunch? Like Amy at school? Absolutely, Michael said, lifting her up so she could reach the higher branches. What should we call this foundation? Rachel considered this with the seriousness she brought to all important decisions. What about the Angel Foundation? Because angels help people when they need it most, and then they help them learn to fly on their own. Jennifer and Michael exchanged a look over Rachel's head, both of them struck by their daughter's wisdom and compassion. The Angel Foundation it is, Michael agreed. The foundation became Jennifer's passion project, and watching her pour her heart into helping other families gave Michael a deeper appreciation for the woman she had become. She wasn't just the girl he had fallen in love with 8 years ago. She was someone stronger, more compassionate, more beautiful than he could have imagined. Spring brought new challenges and new joys. Rachel's adoption proceedings were finalized, making Michael legally her father in the eyes of the law, though in his heart he had been her daddy since the moment she climbed into his lap that first morning. Jennifer had been promoted to Vice President of Community Relations at Michael's company, overseeing not just the foundation, but all their corporate social responsibility initiatives. You know what I realized today? Rachel said one evening as Michael helped her with her homework at the kitchen table of their new house. I realized that I've been promising to pay for things my whole life, but I never thought about what I was really promising. What do you mean, sweetheart? Well, when I promised to pay for the milk when I grew up, I wasn't just promising money. I was promising to become the kind of person who could take care of people. And when I promised Amy that someone would help her with lunch, I wasn't promising that someone else would do it. I was promising that I would find a way to make it happen. Michael set down his pen and looked at his daughter with amazement. At 8 years old, she already understood concepts that many adults never grasped. That's very wise, Rachel. What made you think about that? I was thinking about how you and Mama both promised things too. Mama promised she would work hard and study so we could have a better life, and she kept that promise. And you promised you would be my daddy forever. and you're keeping that promise every day. And what about you? What promises are you making now? Rachel considered this carefully, her small face serious with thought. I promise to work hard in school so I can help run the Angel Foundation when I grow up. I promise to always help people who need it, just like you and Mama taught me. And I promise to remember that the best promises aren't about money. They're about love. Later that night, after Rachel was asleep, Michael found Jennifer in their home office working on grant proposals for the foundation. He stood in the doorway for a moment, watching her work by lamplight, her blonde hair falling softly around her face as she concentrated on helping other families build better lives. "It's been a year," he said quietly. Jennifer looked up, momentarily confused, then smiled as she remembered their conversation on her balcony the previous winter. "Has it really? 1 year, 2 months, and 16 days since I asked you to marry me. You've been counting. Every single day." Michael walked into the office and knelt beside her chair, taking her hands in his. "Jennifer Stanley, will you marry me? Not because we have a daughter together, not because we have a history, but because I love the woman you are today. Right now, in this moment. I love your strength, your compassion, your brilliant mind, and the way you make me want to be better than I ever thought I could be." Jennifer's eyes filled with tears, but this time they were tears of joy, not fear. "Yes, Michael Dalton, I'll marry you. I'll marry you because you kept your promise to be the father Rachel deserves and because you've shown me that some things are worth the risk of believing in again." Their wedding was small and perfect, held in the backyard of their Hartford home with Rachel serving as the flower girl and maid of honor rolled into one. She had insisted on making a speech during the reception, standing on a chair so everyone could see her. "My name is Rachel Dalton," she began, her voice clear and confident. "And I want to tell you all a story about promises. Once upon a time, there was a little girl who promised to pay for milk when she grew up. She didn't know that promises aren't just about money. They're about love and taking care of people and never giving up on the things that matter most." The crowd of family and friends listened in rapt attention as Rachel continued. "That little girl met an angel who taught her that the best promises are the ones we make with our hearts. And that angel turned out to be her daddy, who had been looking for her his whole life without knowing it. And her mama, who had been working so hard to keep all her promises, finally found someone who wanted to help her keep them." Rachel paused, looking directly at Michael and Jennifer, who were both crying openly now. "So today isn't just about Mama and Daddy getting married. It's about all of us promising to take care of each other and to help other people keep their promises too. And I think that's the most beautiful promise of all." As the years passed, the Dalton family grew in love and purpose. The Angel Foundation became one of the most respected charitable organizations in Connecticut, helping hundreds of families transition from poverty to self-sufficiency. Jennifer earned her MBA and became CEO of the foundation, while Michael's company thrived under their shared leadership, becoming known for innovative financial services that actually served families rather than exploiting them. Rachel grew into a remarkable teenager, wise beyond her years but still possessed of the same sweet spirit that had captured Michael's heart in that grocery store years before. She spent her summers interning at the foundation, learning about nonprofit management and community outreach, already preparing for the day when she would take over their family's mission of helping others. "Do you ever think about that day in the grocery store?" Jennifer asked Michael one evening as they sat on their back porch, watching Rachel practice soccer in the yard with friends from school. "Every single day," Michael replied. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if I hadn't been there? If she hadn't been brave enough to ask for help?" "I try not to," Jennifer admitted. "But I think somehow, some way, we would have found each other again. We were meant to be a family, all three of us. All three of us." As the sun set over Hartford, painting the sky in brilliant shades of pink and gold, Rachel came running up to the porch, breathless and glowing with the joy of simply being alive. "Mama, Daddy, watch this," she called, demonstrating a new soccer move she'd learned. "Coach says I might make varsity next year." "That's wonderful, sweetheart," Michael said, pulling her into a hug, despite her protests that she was sweaty from practice. "We're so proud of you." "I'm proud of us too." Rachel said, settling between her parents on the porch swing they'd installed when they first moved into the house. We kept all our promises, didn't we? We did indeed, Jennifer agreed, wrapping her arm around their daughter. And we're still keeping them, Michael added. Every single day. As stars began to appear in the darkening sky, the Dalton family sat together in comfortable silence, each of them reflecting on the journey that had brought them to this moment. A journey that began with a little girl's innocent promise to pay for milk when she grew up, and had blossomed into something more beautiful than any of them could have imagined. In the distance, church bells chimed 9 o'clock, and Rachel stirred in her parents' arms. I should probably go do my homework, she said reluctantly. In a few more minutes, Michael said, not quite ready to let go of this perfect moment. Okay, but just a few more. I have a history test tomorrow on the Great Depression, and Mrs. Williams says understanding how people survived hard times helps us appreciate what we have now. She's right about that, Jennifer said softly, thinking about her own journey from struggle to stability to happiness. I told her about how we learned that lesson in our family, Rachel continued, about how Mama worked so hard when I was little, and how Daddy found us when we needed him most, and how we all learned that the best things in life aren't things at all. They're people who love you and promises that are kept. As Rachel finally headed inside to tackle her homework, Michael and Jennifer remained on the porch, holding hands and watching the stars emerge one by one in the clear Connecticut sky. No regrets? Michael asked quietly. None at all, Jennifer replied. Well, maybe one. What's that? I regret that it took us 8 years to find our way back to each other. Think of all the bedtime stories you missed, all the first days of school, all the scraped knees you could have kissed better. But if we'd stayed together back then, we would have been different people. Maybe we wouldn't have been ready to be the parents Rachel needed. Maybe we had to go through everything we went through to become who we are now. Jennifer considered this, watching their daughter through the kitchen window as she spread her books across the table with the same methodical precision she'd inherited from both parents. Maybe you're right. Maybe everything happened exactly the way it was supposed to. I know it did, Michael said with quiet conviction, because it brought us here, to this moment, to this life we've built together. Inside the house, Rachel was bent over her history textbook, reading about families who had lost everything during the Great Depression, but had found ways to survive through love and determination and sheer stubborn hope. She thought about her own family's story, about how they had found each other against impossible odds, about how love really could conquer all when people were brave enough to believe in it. At the top of her homework assignment, she wrote her name in careful cursive, Rachel Elizabeth Dalton. She had chosen Elizabeth as her confirmation name in honor of the sister she had never met, the baby who had died, so that her father would be free to find her. It was her way of making sure that even though she had never known Elizabeth, she would always be part of their family story. As she worked on her assignment about resilience in the face of hardship, Rachel thought about the promises that had shaped her life. Her mother's promise to work hard and build a better future. Her father's promise to be there for her always, once he finally found her. Her own promise to help others the way her family had been helped. But most of all, she thought about the promise they had all made together on her parents' wedding day, the promise to love and support each other, to face whatever challenges life might bring as a united family, and to use their blessings to bless others in return. Outside, her parents were still sitting on the porch swing, talking quietly about their plans for the foundation, about Rachel's future, about the new house they were building for a family whose home had been destroyed in a fire. They talked about ordinary things and extraordinary things, about dreams fulfilled and new dreams taking shape. And in that moment, as the night settled peacefully around their Hartford home, all three members of the Dalton family understood that they had kept the most important promise of all, the promise to love each other unconditionally, to never give up on each other, and to remember that the most precious things in life are not bought with money, but paid for with the currency of the heart. The little girl who had once promised to pay for milk when she grew up had indeed kept her word, though not in the way anyone could have expected. She had paid with love, with hope, with the simple belief that good things can happen to people who are brave enough to ask for help and generous enough to help others in return. And in the end, that payment had been worth more than all the money in the world. We'd love to hear your thoughts on this beautiful love story. Let us know what you thought of this tale full of emotions and surprises. Tell us your name, where you're watching from, and rate this story from 0 to 10 if it touched your heart. And if you enjoyed the plot, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the amazing new stories coming soon. See you next time.